One thing that it's breaking my heart when I look at Christians around the nation, and I mean, I'm not talking just a few, I'm talking about in droves, that they're accepting this homosexual agenda, like it's, and you know, I personally think that Christians should boycott Hillsong. I really do. Boycott Hillsong. Because they're allowing homosexuals to get up on there and it's a Christian group. It's a Christian music, praise and worship, beautiful music. But I am so dumbfounded by what I'm seeing. They have their reasoning is, well, we're going to offend one or two groups. One or two groups, you should only be concerned about offending one person. Yeah. But they're saying, well, you know, if we offend this group over here, we're going to lose them. It's all about losing money. And I mean, that's actually what came out of their mouth, you know. But so we're trying to, basically they're saying, we're trying to kind of balance things. Saying you can't do that. No. And unfortunately, you know, you see pastors, and you know, I'm going to name names because I hope it does get back. They need to be ashamed. Joel Osteen sitting there, you know, wavering between, you know, when these people are trying to nail him down. So you're saying homosexuality? He's saying, well, yeah, I don't talk about that in my church. I'm thinking, what do you talk about in the church?
Well, maybe something timely. Is there something timely, more timely?
He gets a dessert in his church.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why their churches are so big. I mean, they just give free money, you know, to attract them. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Liberalism is alive in America!
But see, what they don't realize is this whole thing that's just transpired, the legalization of the homosexual murder. People don't realize what's on the back of that. Yeah. But if we do research, and the research is there for anybody that wants to find it, even our public schools, you would be so surprised if you found out what's behind the public school sex education class. When they're telling the kids that this is, you know we've taken a census, you know, and all the males believe this way and all the females, no. That's totally a lie. I'm going to give you a quick rundown because I think every Christian should know this because we need to arm ourselves to tear down. The Bible says, expose the works of darkness. And I mean, we just know just by the word of Yahweh that's wrong. But now, from this standpoint, knowing what's behind it, you'll be able to. I think it's interesting to note that if anybody's familiar with the NAMBLA organization.
Yep.
Okay, that's the Shelley, would you?
National Association of Men Loving Boys.
Part of the UN. Is it part of the UN?
And they're a nonprofit.
It's a non-profit organization of men loving boys.
Men loving boys.
It's tax exempt. Yeah, and people say, oh, that would never happen. I'm thinking, oh, let's wait. Yeah, did you know that NAMBLA marches with all these homosexual pride parades? They march right along with them. In fact, the headquarters of a lot of the gay and lesbian organizations actually have invited NAMBLA to march with them. Yeah. And, you know, the funny thing is I heard a Christian rap artist say this. He says, you know, why do homosexuals get mad when the pedophiles compare themselves to them? Because they're saying, oh, you're sick. You're perverted. That's wrong. And then they get upset when we look at the homosexual and say, you're perverted. You're sick. You're wrong. They say, well, no, it's not. It's no different than, you know, you going with a white male and a black female and thinking, hello, male, female. You know, totally different. You know, but then they try to justify themselves and they say, well, we can't help it. We were born that way. So that makes you right. So now here comes the pedophiles. Well, you know what? Come to think of it, we were born that way. Okay? And then you have the people that are really bad stuff, even more. I mean, you can't get even worse than that anyway. I mean, we're talking, but bestiality and all that, they're all saying, oh, we were born that way.
Yeah. We're born to do abortion, we're born to murder, we're born to kill.
Yeah.
And
but see, back before back in the 40s, all the way up until the 70s, homosexuality was considered a sickness. Actually, before that in the church, according to Yahweh, it was considered a sin. Yeah, absolutely. So is living together with somebody outside of marriage. So, you know, all these things that are acceptable today were on the sitcoms, and that's one of the other ways that the media works is it desensitizes people to where all of a sudden we're laughing, you know, to where instead of you being grieved in your spirit and just torn up inside that there's homosexuals, you know, on television, we can get a laugh, you know, before you know it. And I had to do a stir of beer when just had just a, you know how sometimes you get on a little quick rabbit trail? I just had to vet. Things happen in my life, sometimes I have to get a camera and vet and post it. And, you know, I was talking about how people need to get right with God right now. Get right, because you got to get to sin out, all of it, you know. And then I just looked in the camera and said, you pastors or deacons, whoever you are, I said, you watching football? I said, God sees that lust when you stand and stare straight, you know, at the cheerleaders. I said, you can have ordination on your wall and go straight to hell. You can have baptismal certificates, split hell wide open. You can have a communion wafer on your tongue. Baptismal water dripping off your head and split hell wide open. You know, it's, Yeshua said, why do you call me Lord, Lord, and do not do what I say? In 1948, now this is pretty interesting. This is on PBS's website. Now we all know PBS. It's family stuff, right? Oh. In 1948, a biologist and sex researcher, Alfred Kinsey, publishes a book called Sexual Behavior in the Human Male. From his research, Kinsey concluded that homosexual behavior is not restricted to people who identify themselves as homosexual, and that 37% of men have enjoyed homosexual activities at least once. While psychologists and psychiatrists in the 1940s considered homosexuality a form of illness, the findings surprised many conservative notions about sexuality. The findings, well, what most people don't realize about this guy, there's documentaries out there that expose this guy. This guy was a sicko. This guy, in chapter 5 of the same book, they don't realize what's in this stuff. He was doing sexual research even with children. I mean, the guy should have been put away. He should have been locked up. But he wasn't.
It was for science.
Yeah, exactly. For science. Yeah.
Was that the 60s, you said?
In 1948.
48.
Yeah. And just to let you know how sick, I mean, all the way down to like a 2 or 3 month old. Okay? This guy he needed to be put out in Guantanamo or something. You know? But the point is, you're saying the statistics, the only people he did statistics on were the perverts and the pedophiles and the homosexuals. He didn't take normal heterosexual people and ask them, you know. But this is where it's gone, guys. This is where it's gone. This is on PBS. They're talking about this guy like he's some kind of hero. And then a guy by the name of Harry Hay comes along, and they considered him the founder of the American homosexual movement. He invited NAM lawmakers to march with him in 1993. Okay, he's a weirdo. In 1950, he started the Medicine Society, the country's first successful gay liberation organization, and he also became an active member of the Communist Party and celebrated Marxist teaching. So this is where this stuff is all attached to. You know, I mean, there's a lot of people that say Hitler, and all of these guys were involved in that kind of stuff too. In 1950s, homosexuality was still considered a mental illness, but thanks to these two guys, they're kind of ushering it into being accepted. By September 21st of 1995, in San Francisco, the Daughters of Ballistes became the first lesbian rights organization in the United States, so it's gaining more and more acceptance. 1973, based on Evelyn Hooker's findings, and of course she's hanging out with, you know who, the other guys I mentioned, the American Psychiatric Association removed homosexuality from its diagnostic and statistical manual of psychological disorders. Okay? So we see it began to open up.
Oh, if they left it as a disorder, they'd have a pharmaceutical for it.
Absolutely.
And they wouldn't let the communities too big to allow pharmaceutical to be administered to them.
Yeah. In 1965, Dr. Jude Marmer, a psychiatrist at UCLA, picked Hooker to be the chairman of the National Institute of Mental Health Task Force on Homosexuality. Marmer soon became the vice president of the American Psychiatric Association. The task force on homosexuality also included Alfred Kinsey, what I just told you about. He actually hired people to actually do experiments on children. This is so disgusting. I'm telling you what, you wonder why our country's the condition it's in. Oh my gosh. And then, I'm just going to skip down a lot of this because basically, these people talked about, in their writings, they talk not only about having sex with children, but animals and stuff, and saying it's totally normal. That's what they're saying. They're putting that stuff, and
It's totally normal.
morally normal. That's what they're
And
saying.
in the Bible, not only was the man executed, but the beast had to be executed.
Yeah. One of the guys in this organization, this is one of the guys that hangs around with these guys, he says, in a variation magazine, Pomeroy offers this advice. This is actually published. We find many beautiful, mutually satisfying sexual relationships between fathers and daughters.
Well,
This is actually put in literature. And people don't think it's going to escalate to that. I'm telling you what, Yahweh's got to judge us. If we're allowed to continue in the way people kind of poo-poo stuff,
what's your first? That's the society. Flesh. Interesting that he came in the flesh.
and I think it's interesting to note that the gay rights piggyback on the women's rights, because what they did, the government's got this way of always putting extra, bills in the back of other ones. So when the women are fighting for their rights, the homosexuals are trying to do, but they slip it in there so that when that gets passed, the other ones get passed. So what happened? When the homosexuals had their bill, it was SB 1172, that's the name of the bill. When that was passed, guess what else got passed? Pediphilia. Rode right in behind it. People don't think, yeah, because what they did is they make sure they don't mention, when they're fighting for something, they don't say homosexual rights, they said sexual preferences. That leaves it wide open for everybody else that wants to come in. In fact, what I'm doing is, after I'm done with this, I put a whole bunch of video clips, news clips, and I'm going to put it on the end of this because I want as many people to see this and rise up and people start getting involved in school to get the sex education out of school. It's sick. That's why our kids are having the problems they're having. Because this is not normal studies on normal male and female, Americans growing up in, stuff we shouldn't even have to be told. I mean, we never had to be told how to do that. I mean, can you imagine? The animals know how to do it. How much better are we, And yet, they're telling us that our children need to know this stuff.
At an early age, too. Very early.
Absolutely. But the point is, they're teaching them stuff that's coming right out of the textbook, out of the closets, perverse and homosexual. This is why these kids are having these problems, these issues, trying to figure out, who am I? What am I, am I supposed to feel this way? And they're being told, oh yeah, it's natural.
They have classes right now. They have classes in school right now. Early on, kindergarten, first grade, in different schools throughout the United States, gender identity is what it's called.
Oh, yeah.
And you can either be a boy, or you don't have to be a boy. You can be a girl. You don't have to be either one.
You could be other.
Yeah.
No. I'm like,
Is it Walmart doing that? They're starting to combine the clothing of unisex?
Target.
Yeah.
Target.
Yeah.
They're even doing that with bathrooms.
Yeah.
It's getting ridiculous. And the thing is it's persecution is coming to the Christians, whether we like it or not. When you look and you see that a printer, because he refuses to print a gay person's t-shirt or whatever, he's persecuted and fined because he will not print that. And yet, Christians have never gone into a homosexual place and asked them for business or income because we don't believe in what they do. We don't want them to prosper anyway. And these homosexuals, they come in, and it's not like they could easily go down the road and find somebody else. You know?
Oh, the lady that was arrested for an activity with gay.
Yeah, for the cake.
They
Oh, for
came
the license,
from,
yeah.
they came from Ohio to where she was in Tennessee, or from Tennessee to Ohio where she was to get their license.
Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't just around the corner, they would travel.
Because they have
Because
the
they knew
riches.
she would say no.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, and then they tell her to shut up. We don't want to hear what you, and yet they're yelling, we want equality, we want freedom. Okay, freedom means everybody's allowed to say what they want, but they don't want that. They want to be able to say what they want, and they want you to shut up. And I think, okay, what's free about that? So we see where it's going, and also like the couple that had a cake baking place, because they didn't want to bake a cake for the homosexuals, they got fined, and I think, okay. And then the last step is the homosexuals, they come into the church and they demand that our God, Yahweh, the one who has cursed this kind of a union, the one that says it is an abomination for a man to lay with a man as he lays with a woman, it's an abomination. And they said, we not only want, we demand that you marry us and have your Creator bless our union. That would be Like a stripper walking into the church saying, I want the right to be nude in here. Hello? Or, you know, a child pervert to say, I want to sit with the kids. And getting the government backing. That's exactly the same. Same thing. And if people aren't seeing it, they say, oh, you're being judgmental. I mean, after all, we should allow them to do what they want. I'm thinking, do you realize where this is going? Now, I have news clippings that show this. There are pedophiles standing in line now saying, we have a right. After all, we can't fight our feelings. And after all, if the children are willing, I'm thinking, this is sick. Yeah. This is sick.
Yeah, because children are so innocent. You go to a 7 or 8-year-old in the U.S. and anything, they're just so innocent. The pedophile goes up and says, we want folks to be fun.
Well, I'll give you some candy. Yeah.
It's no sense that you go with it.
Yeah,
The point of the matter is it's all sick. A man sleeping with another man or a woman sleeping with another woman is sick. It's defiling it. It's against nature. It's against Yahweh. And sure, they say, oh, that's a hate crime if you speak. Oh, really? So when's the last time we had children and they're out playing in the road and you yell at them and get in there, you know, the neighbor comes running up saying, oh, you hate your child. Oh, that's so horrible. You vicious viper. How dare you tell your child to get out of the road? From where I stand, this Bible tells me that if we warn people, we love them.
So first of all, I would like to know, you've been president of the AP for several years. I just would like you to refresh my memory about what was the history of reorientation therapy. When did you start to hear about this new development, and what can you tell me about the first reaction of the APA at that time?
It probably started in the APA in the early 1970s. And at that time, the women's movement was in ascendancy and it tended to overshadow the gay rights issue. But the two seemed to meld as they went on. And, you know, there was a time when I couldn't tell the difference between women's rights and gay rights because it involved the same people. The first time it came up, and I was a member of Council. This would have been 1975, because I remember that's when I made the resolution. I made the resolution that being gay was not a mental illness. It was characterological. And it passed the Council of Representatives. And that was the first issue that came up. I also said that with that the APA, if it passes this resolution, will also vote to continue research that demonstrates whatever the research demonstrates, unbiased, open research. It was never done. Yeah. It was never done. But the resolution that I made in the Council did get adopted, and by a wide margin. In that era, the Leona Tyler principle was paramount, that the APA would never take a position publicly that wasn't supported by scientific evidence, that it had to be scientifically demonstrated. And we abided, the presidents in my era abided by the Leona Tyler principle. All of a sudden, things began to change as things became more political than scientific. The Leona Tyler principle, which was never withdrawn, disappeared. In fact, you can't even find it in the annals of the APA. If I didn't have it, it wouldn't exist as far as they're concerned. But no, I had no idea, none of us had any idea that we were talking about open dialogue, research, unbiased, and the gay rights movement in those days didn't have the kind of militancy it has now. I mean, now it's all or none. In the early years, it was more like, let's see what's happening.
from your experience, when did you see this change of direction in the APA coming?
It started changing pretty drastically by the late 1980s. By the mid-1990s, the Leona Tyler principle was absolutely forgotten. That political stances seemed to override any scientific results. Cherry-picking results became the mode. And the gay rights movement sort of captured the APA. Yeah, it's very interesting the way it happened. The APA bent over backwards to be understanding and open. And it's understanding that it had to, it left an open door for people to rush in and use it for other than scientific purposes, for political purposes. It was preceded by a number of issues. It became part of the movement for what one might call diversity. You want to bring all underrepresented peoples into psychology. And this is a very lofty idea on the surface of it. But when it becomes a bias, if I had to choose now, I would see a need to form an organization that would recruit straight white males, which are underrepresented today in the APA.
What happened step by step so that the organization changed like this within 20 years?
We developed a group of psychologists that numbered around 200 to 250 that rotated themselves through all the offices of the APA. When a rule was passed that you couldn't serve more than X number of sessions on console or on a certain particular office, they would rotate. They would run for another office and then come back to console. So for years, about 200 to 250 people were running the APA, and they were a very select, inbred group. They were ultra-liberal, and anything that wasn't ultra-liberal was anathema. So that things like questioning some of the statements about gay and lesbian rights was not being accepted. It became a civil rights issue rather than a scientific issue.
Be protecting for public employees is not only heterosexuality, bisexuality, pedophilia, transvesticism, I'm not going to read them all, voyeurism, exhibitionism, fetism, zoophilia, necrophilia, clismophilia, and the list goes on. I teach in the public school system, and I know that this would impact the public school system, and we have parents who bring their kids to school every day and expect the school to protect them. And what's going to protect our children if someone that is a pedophiliac comes in and gets a teaching job, is a bus driver, is a custodian, and they could be people that just want to prey on children, and they'll be protected with this law. So we have a real concern considering the different types of orientations. I don't believe that's in the best interest of our children.
You know, when you hear that 1 in 10 people are gay or some other sex-related statistic that seems extraordinary and you're incredulous, well, actually there's a reason to be. Because maybe most of this information comes from something called the Kinsey Report, an iconic study of sexual behavior. But Dr. Judith Reisman, an expert in the field, says this is severely misplaced. She joins me now from Washington, D.C. Welcome to you, Doctor.
Thank you. It's a delight to be back here with you again, Michael.
Thank you. Now, Tell us about the Kinsey report, because there was a movie about Kinsey with Liam Neeson, and Liam Neeson only plays really great guys, so it had to all be true, surely.
Yes, of course. He's the hero of heroes. I know Schindler's List and all that. Yeah, it's very tragic that he played this man. Yeah, Dr. Alfred Kinsey was indeed a homosexist. That is, he believed in the superiority of homosexuality or bisexuality, however you want to put it. He was a sadomasochistic psychopath, and this is all documented. No surprise, of course, a pornography addict, naturally. So no surprise, indeed, that he concocted a body of research he called research, which claimed that 10 to 37% of the population was homosexual, that sexual acts with children are perfectly harmless, that all infants can have orgasms and that sort of thing, and created what we now call the sexual revolution or sexual anarchy. Remember, this was 1948, so it was just barely out of World War II, so there simply wasn't the kind of opposition to these lies that would have been expected at all. And they became the dogma for all human sexuality education, and we now see it in all our laws across every aspect of the Western world, or Judeo-Christian or English-speaking world.
Entire government policies in the Western world in particular have been conducted, created around this.
Absolutely. You were just speaking a few moments ago about I just caught the end of it, but certainly I've been following the UNESCO policies and Planned Parenthood, International Planned Parenthood Federation, and that sort of thing, and our recent injections, not inoculations of little children for Hep B was before, but HPV now. All of this comes back to the notion that we are all sexual from birth, and Kinsey created that notion, and now we have the pedophile information exchange moving into what's called the minor attracted children, minor attracted persons efforts to destigmatize all pedophilia. What we're looking at is a massive takeover by the pedophile world, and that is dominated even by people who've been advising the Catholic Church. Dr. Fred Berlin, who was advisor to the Catholic Church on pedophilia, just was the keynote speaker at the conference I attended on minor attracted persons, the effort to destigmatize all aspects of pedophilia and make it a legitimate, sexual orientation, indeed, is what was defined at that conference.
No, but this man is still advising the Roman Catholic Church?
As far as I know, he is. I have read nothing that suggests that he's been removed, and certainly nothing suggesting that he was removed because of his promotion of these policies from the very beginning in his clinic at Johns Hopkins, which was founded by Dr. John Money, who advocates for an end of age of consent, advocated for an end of age of consent from the university at Johns Hopkins, and advocated for even kind of what you'd call the rough sex defense. If a boy and a man actually, one of them died as a result of what he called a sadomasochistic ritual. This is insane. This whole thing is insane. And these were the big advisors, yes, to the Catholic Church for many years. And Money is dead, but as far as I know, Dr. Berlin still advises.
This is staggering because, again, most people, Canada, the United States, that reasonable, decent, kind people, they simply want to coexist. They may have certain issues with people of a different sexuality, but live and let live. But this is radically different. Let's talk about Kinsey a little more, because, again, it's not that people quote Kinsey very often, but he's thought to be this great iconic father figure of sexual liberation. You're saying that children were raped in his clinic and he was fully aware of it?
Oh, absolutely, yes. This is the most amazing violation of scientific, well, it's worse than Guatemala. We have a 2-month-old baby identified in Kinsey's own book. I've written several books about this. It's not as though the scientific community is uninformed. It is, however, that they are protecting their turf. They've been quoting him for so long. A 2-month-old baby being tested, quote-unquote, for orgasm. A 4-year-old boy having allegedly 26 orgasms in 24 hours. I mean, that's an around-the-clock experiment. Stopwatch is used to record these things, working with a Nazi pedophile in Germany. I mean, this is outrageous. And I have been unable to break through the control of the scientific world, which shocked me, I must say, in the beginning, because there's so much connected. There is so much money associated and so many prestigious names associated with Kinsey, so much so that we got Liam Neeson playing him in a major Fox, film to celebrate him, as though we were all idiots during World War II and didn't know anything about sex until Kinsey came along.
In June 1944, Alfred Kinsey left Indiana on an 1,800-mile trek across the southwestern United States. He was going to a clandestine meeting with a man who was to become his prime source of information about child sexuality.
This individual was, I suppose you might say, his interest in sex was his main hobby in life. Anything was a sexual object for him. He was interested in having sex with men, women, and children and animals. And he just was curious to see what would happen.
His first sexual contact was overt intercourse with his grandmother. He had looked up his family tree. There were 30, I forget how many, 33 or 38 members. He had had almost all of them. He had had intercourse with hundreds upon hundreds of males and females of every conceivable age. My memory is that it's exceeded 600 for both boys and girls, and we haven't yet got to maturity.
The man was a U.S. government land examiner called Rex King. To protect him, Kinsey gave him the code name Mr. Green. His job took him across Arizona and New Mexico, trips he used to prey on children. He molested at least 800 boys and girls, recording the details in explicit handwritten diaries. Kinsey was told about Green by his own mentor in sex research, Dr. Robert Dickinson. Dickinson had collaborated with the pedophile for several years and taught him how to record his child abuse in scientific detail.
He told him how to measure things and time things, and encouraged him to, he knew he was going to do his ordinary behavior anyway. Dickinson couldn't have stopped him from being a pedophile. But he said, at least you ought to, do something scientific about it, so it won't be just your jollies, it'll be something worthwhile to science.
The only justification for defending Kinsey was that all this happened before. If Green was sexually abusing children to 1954, Kinsey's last book came out in 1953. That certainly would mean that all of that violence and all of that abuse was going on throughout the entire time Kinsey was collecting these data. Wouldn't it?
Green was not the only pedophile providing information to Kinsey.
We got them in prisons, a lot of them, because we had the prison records of these people. So we'd say, give us a list of everybody in San Quentin who's sent up on pedophilia charge, and we'd go after them. So we got a lot that way. Then there was also a pedophile organization in this country. They cooperated with us, and some of them who were not, of course, not incarcerated, they came and gave us information.
Not all of the pedophile information arriving at the Kinsey Institute in Indiana came from within America.
There was a man in Germany who was a pedophile, and he wrote Kinsey. And he was interested in information about pedophilia, and he offered his own case history. Of course, Kinsey couldn't go to Germany to get it, but he wrote him questions in a letter, and they carried on quite a correspondence. And we were learning some interesting things about pedophilia in Germany, you might say.
It is a criticism the Kinsey Institute rejects.
I think people have got to ask themselves the question, do they believe that research into sexuality should be done or should not be done? Particularly research into sexuality which might be, in some sense, illegal.
But if the cost potentially is more children at risk of abuse, can that cost be justified?
Consider the cost of remaining in ignorance. Unless we know about these behaviours, we'll be in a much worse position than if we have more information about them. That was Kinsey's view.
John Bancroft is adamant that Kinsey never did more than accept reports from pedophiles on their sexual activity.
Kinsey didn't ask anybody to carry out any particular form of sexual behaviour. He simply asked them to let him know of their experiences they'd had.
But at von Baljasek's trial, an exchange between the judge and the pedophile seemed to suggest otherwise. The judge said,
I had the impression that you got to the children in order to impress Kinsey and to deliver him material.
And von Baljasek replied,
Kinsey himself asked me for that.
If the judge's impression was correct, and if von Baljasek was telling the truth, it would be evidence of Kinsey's involvement in ongoing child sexual abuse.
It tells me that von Baljasek, who was not a sex researcher, got his directions as to how to do the, quote, scientific part of the research from Dr. Kinsey, that he was directing.
The issue of paedophilia, look, it's very easy to be sensational about this and play tabloid and scream and shout. This is a very complex issue. There are men who are attracted sexually to children. It's invariably, almost exclusively men. Now, how do we deal with that? Many of those men, some would argue most of those men, fight on a regular, maybe a daily basis to make sure that they keep these temptations in check, would never break the law, are often quite self-loathing about what they are. Those people have to be helped. I'm not here to play the bleeding heart with you or anything, but...
Now to a story about one of the most sensitive subjects imaginable, the abuse of children. There are some people who think attitudes and actions towards pedophiles should be adjusted. Correspondent Shannon Bream explains.
A small group of psychiatrists and other mental health professionals is advocating changes to the way the American Psychiatric Association defines pedophilia in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, or DSM, saying those they call minor attracted persons are being unfairly stigmatized.
Instead, a psychiatric term gets turned into something that's just a demonizing pejorative. That troubles me.
Dr. Fred Berlin, associate professor at Johns Hopkins University Medical School, was the keynote speaker at a conference held by the group in Baltimore, Maryland last week. He says those pushing to redefine pedophilia are simply worried that the current perception keeps adults who are attracted to children from getting help.
If there are people out there who are attracted through no fault of their own towards children, we want to try to assist them to make sure they don't act in ways that are going to cause problems for other people.
But Berlin admits there were some at the conference who suggested sexual relations between adults and children are acceptable, something he says he does not condone. Dr. Judith Reisman, author of Sexual Sabotage, attended the event.
The whole conference was slanted very clearly to the notion that pedophilia was a normal variation of human sexual conduct.
In 1990 and 1992, the Baltimore Sun reported that Berlin refused to comply with a state law, requiring him to report patients he believed were engaged in child sex abuse, instead directing them to first see a lawyer, who could then direct them to Berlin, thus protecting any conversation under the attorney-client privilege. The Maryland Attorney General deemed that illegal. Today, Berlin labeled the accusation that he would refuse to report a pedophile actively engaged in child abuse, quote, absolutely false. Skeptics say the group Berlin spoke to has one goal: to move society a step closer to accepting sexual contact between adults and children, even decriminalize it.
Absolutely. Oh, they're very clear about that. Their goal is to take all shame out of the lust for children.
When asked for comment today, the American Psychiatric Association said sexual abuse of minors is a crime and, quote, we stand firmly behind efforts to criminally prosecute those who engage in it. In Washington, Shannon Bream, Fox
The party,
News.
we're told, is supposed to last well beyond midnight. As for the statue, it could end up at the Arkansas State Capitol, where there is a Ten Commandments statue also planned. Live near downtown Detroit, Jane Park, 7 Action News.